Welcome to Global News, your go-to channel for the biggest stories shaping our world. Today, we're diving into a development that has left the entire globe in shock. Mexico, a country often underestimated on the world stage, has just made a move that no one saw coming. It's a move that's not only changing its relationship with the United States, but also rewriting the rules of international trade and sustainability. What is this shocking development? How did it come to be? And what does it mean for the future of North America and beyond? Let's unpack this incredible story step by step. Picture this, a quiet morning in Mexico City. The sun is just rising over the historic Zocalo Square, where the Mexican flag waves proudly in the breeze. Inside the National Palace, Mexico's president, let's call her Claudia Vargas, is preparing for a meeting that will change history. Across the border in Washington, D.C., the U.S. president, who we'll name Donald Trump, is reviewing a proposal that his advisors can hardly believe. The proposal on the table is a $200 billion trade and energy pact between Mexico and the United States, one that promises to transform both nations' economies while setting a new global standard for sustainability. But this isn't just any deal. It's a deal that no one expected Mexico to propose, let alone lead. To understand why this is such a big deal, we need to take a step back and look at the history between Mexico and the U.S. for decades. The relationship between these two neighbors has been a mix of cooperation and tension. On one hand, they share a 2,000-mile border and billions of dollars in trade through agreements like the USMCA, the United States-Mexico-Canada Agreement. On the other hand, issues like immigration, border security, and economic disparities have often strained their ties. Mexico has long been seen as the junior partner in this relationship, a country that exports goods like cars and avocados to the U.S., but rarely takes the lead on global initiatives. Meanwhile, the U.S. has often dictated the terms of their partnership, focusing on its own interests first. So what changed? Why is Mexico suddenly at the forefront of a deal that's making headlines around the world? The answer lies in a combination of bold leadership, economic strategy, and a vision for the future. Let's start with Claudia Vargas, our fictional Mexican president. Claudia came to power 3 years ago on a platform of economic reform and environmental sustainability. She promised to modernize Mexico's economy, reduce its dependence on fossil fuels, and position the country as a leader in the fight against climate change. At the time, many dismissed her promises as ambitious but unrealistic. After all, Mexico has struggled with challenges like corruption, poverty, and infrastructure gaps for years. How could it possibly take on a project of this scale? But Claudia had a plan. Over the past 3 years, her administration has quietly worked to overhaul Mexico's economy. They've invested heavily in education and technology, creating a new generation of engineers and innovators. They've cracked down on corruption, freeing up billions of dollars that were previously lost to mismanagement, and they've partnered with private companies to build solar farms and wind turbines across the country, turning Mexico into a hub for renewable energy. By 2025, Mexico has become the third largest producer of solar energy in the Western Hemisphere, trailing only the US and Brazil. This transformation didn't happen overnight, but it set the stage for what was to come. Now let's shift our focus to the United States. President Donald Trump, a pragmatic leader with a background in business, has spent much of his term focused on domestic issues. The US economy has been struggling with rising energy costs and a growing demand for clean energy. At the same time, Trump has faced pressure to improve relations with Mexico, especially after years of tension over trade tariffs and border policies. When Claudia Vargas reached out to propose a joint energy and trade pact, Trump was intrigued but skeptical. The U.S. has the resources and technology to lead such a project on its own. So why partner with Mexico? The answer lies in the details of the proposal. Mexico isn't just offering to collaborate, it's bringing something to the table that the U.S. desperately needs. Under the terms of the deal, Mexico will invest $100 billion to build a massive renewable energy grid along the U.S.-Mexico border. This grid will stretch from Tijuana to Brownsville, covering thousands of miles and generating enough electricity to power millions of homes on both sides of the border. We'll match Mexico's investment with another $100 billion, but here's the kicker. Mexico will provide the majority of the labor and raw materials, which are far cheaper than in the U.S. In return, the U.S. will agree to a series of trade reforms, including lower tariffs on Mexican goods and increased access to U.S. markets for Mexican businesses. This deal is a win-win on paper, but it's also a bold gamble. For Mexico, it's a chance to prove itself as a global leader while boosting its economy. The project is expected to create over 500,000 jobs in Mexico, from construction workers to engineers to factory workers producing solar panels. It will also reduce Mexico's reliance on imported energy, making the country more self-sufficient. For the U.S., the deal promises cheaper energy, new jobs, and a stronger partnership with its southern neighbor. But there are risks too. The project's scale is unprecedented, and any delays or cost overruns could strain both countries' budgets. Plus, there's the political risk. Many in the U.S. are skeptical of partnering with Mexico, while some in Mexico worry that the U.S. will dominate the project and leave Mexico with the short end of the stick. So how did this deal come together? Let's take a closer look at the negotiations. It all started 6 months ago, when Claudia Vargas invited Donald Trump to a summit in Mexico City. The two leaders met behind closed doors, flanked by their top advisors. At first the talks were tense. Trump was hesitant to commit to such a large investment, especially with midterm elections looming in the US. He worried that his opponents would paint the deal as a handout to Mexico, accusing him of putting foreign interests ahead of American ones. Claudia, on the other hand, was determined to secure equal terms. She refused to let Mexico be seen as a junior partner, insisting that the deal be a true collaboration. After days of back and forth, the two leaders finally reached an agreement. They shook hands in front of the press, with the Mexican and US flags behind them, and announced the $200 billion pact to the world. The announcement sent shockwaves through the international community. News outlets from CNN to BBC ran headlines like "Mexico's bold move stuns the world in a new era for North America." Social media exploded with reactions, from excitement to skepticism. On platforms like X, hashtags like #MexicoUS deal and #RenewableFuture began trending within hours. Some praised the deal as a step forward for climate action, while others questioned whether it could really work. Let's break down the specifics of the project. The renewable energy grid will consist of three main components: solar farms, wind turbines, and a network of high-voltage transmission lines. The solar farms will be built in northern Mexico, where the desert climate provides ideal conditions for solar energy. The wind turbines will be installed along the Gulf of Mexico, taking advantage of the region's strong coastal winds. The transmission lines will connect these energy sources to cities on both sides of the border, from San Diego to Houston to Monterrey. Once completed, the grid will generate enough electricity to power 10 million homes, reducing carbon emissions by an estimated 50 million tons per year. But the project isn't just about energy, it's also about trade. As part of the deal, the US has agreed to lower tariffs on Mexican goods, including agricultural products like avocados and tomatoes. In return, Mexico will open its markets to more US companies, particularly in the tech and automotive sectors. This trade reform is expected to boost bilateral trade by $50 billion over the next decade, creating a more integrated North American economy. For consumers, this could mean lower prices on everything from groceries to cars. For businesses, it's an opportunity to expand into new markets. Now let's talk about the implications of this deal. On the environmental front, it's a major step forward. The world is facing a climate crisis, with rising temperatures, melting ice caps, and extreme weather events becoming more common. By investing in renewable energy, Mexico and the US are setting an example for other countries to follow. If successful, this project could inspire similar collaborations around the world, from Europe to Asia to Africa. It's a reminder that tackling climate change requires global cooperation, not just individual action. Economically, the deal has the potential to reshape North America. For Mexico, it's a chance to modernize its economy and reduce inequality. The jobs created by the project will provide a lifeline to millions of Mexican families, particularly in rural areas where poverty is widespread. The increased trade with the US will also help Mexican businesses grow, creating a ripple effect across the economy. For the US, the deal means lower energy costs and a more stable supply of goods. It's also a chance to rebuild trust with Mexico, paving the way for future collaborations. But not everyone is on board. In the US, some politicians have criticized the deal, arguing that it puts American workers at a disadvantage. They point out that Mexico's lower labor costs could lead to job losses in the US, especially in industries like manufacturing. Others worry about the financial risks, noting that a $200 billion project is a massive undertaking with no guarantee of success. In Mexico, there's similar skepticism. Some fear that the US will dominate the project, leaving Mexico with little control. Others worry that the government is overextending itself, taking on debt that could burden future generations. Despite these concerns, the deal has already begun to take shape. Just last month, construction started on the first solar farm in Sonora, Mexico. Workers are clearing land, installing panels and laying the foundation for what will be one of the largest solar farms in the world. Across the border, US companies are preparing to supply equipment and expertise, while engineers from both countries are working together to design the transmission grid. It's a massive effort that will take years to complete, but the early signs are promising. So what does the future hold? If all goes according to plan, the renewable energy grid will be fully operational by 2030. By then it could transform the way North America produces and consumes energy, making the region a leader in sustainability. The trade reforms will also deepen economic ties between Mexico and the US, creating a more prosperous and interconnected continent. But the road ahead won't be easy. Both countries will need to navigate political challenges, financial hurdles and public skepticism to make this vision a reality. Let's take a moment to reflect on what this deal means for Mexico. For years, Mexico has been overshadowed by its northern neighbor, often seen as a country that follows rather than leads. But this project is changing that narrative. Mexico is stepping onto the global stage with confidence, showing the world what it's capable of. President Claudia Vargas has become a symbol of this new era, a leader who isn't afraid to take risks for the sake of her country's future. Whether the deal succeeds or fails, Mexico has already made history by daring to dream big. For the United States, this deal is a reminder of the power of collaboration. In a world that's increasingly divided, the U.S. has an opportunity to build bridges rather than walls. By working with Mexico, the U.S. can strengthen its own economy while fostering goodwill with its neighbor. President Donald Trump may have been skeptical at first, but his decision to sign on to this deal could be a defining moment of his presidency. As we wrap up, let's think about the bigger picture. This Mexico-US deal isn't just about energy or trade, it's about the future of our planet. It's a story of two nations coming together to tackle some of the biggest challenges of our time: climate change, economic inequality, and global cooperation. It's a story of ambition, risk, and hope. And it's a story that's only just beginning. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into one of the most surprising